Hey guys, welcome back to another Lieutenant Diamond video. Today we are back with some more Kerbal Space Program. I really wanted to do the moon landing, so today we're doing more of that. I know it's the third episode in a row, however, this time I actually managed to do it. I didn't manage to get back to Kerbal again, but that was just because I made one dumb mistake. I forgot to add ore tanks. However, I do believe that if I had the ore tanks, it would have made it, so I'm just going to count it. So, as you can see here, I'm starting to build a much simpler rocket. I actually didn't build that complicated of a rocket. I built this all accidentally off camera because I thought I was recording and I wasn't. So the rocket's pretty much already built, and this is mostly me just trying to get it to the Mun, and I was kind of struggling with it. However, I also made some tweaks to it. And basically this rocket, it's a lot simpler than the other designs. I think I over-engineered the designs too much. I think that was my problem. I was trying to add more boosters, but not really factoring everything in. So I kind of went small and simple and decided to work my way up from there, and it actually ended up really good. I started with the lander, saved it as a separate entity, and then basically designed it to be able to land really easily. And I actually ended up having more than enough fuel to get there. I just didn't have quite enough to take off, unfortunately. However, the booster that I made here is actually really good. It worked really well. So I have a 3 or 4 stage system here in total. That top stage there is for the engine fairing there. I decided I didn't want to use that because I put that there to house the core and some batteries, some extra stuff and bits. I didn't ever really want to decouple it, so it doesn't really count as a stage, if that makes sense. So what I was doing here is I was basically trying to get into orbit with the crazy amount of boosters. I think I had like 8 or 9 boosters on it. Which, I mean, I know that's not actually necessarily a crazy amount of boosters, but it is a pretty decent amount. So this thing had more than enough delta V to not only get into orbit, but with that same stage, the kind of third stage, or second stage I believe it was actually able to get pretty damn close to the Mun and actually get an encounter with it. Getting to the Mun was a bit of a different story, and I ended up making quite a few mistakes, getting some weird orbits, all kinds of crazy stuff. As you can see here, this time I actually went into the atmosphere, which was not good. However, after a few launches and about like 3 hours of working, this video takes place over about an hour. Again, for the first 2 hours I forgot to record. But for about an hour or so, or 2-3 hours or so, I was working on this, and I went through a few designs. I actually did the Starhawk Mark II, which, if you remember that SST, or that like space plane I tried to get to the Mun that crashed, that was the original Starhawk. So right here, we actually get to the successful launch. So I did slow down this footage a little bit more from the other one. The other one was 10 times speed. This, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, yes, this is 4 times speed. And this was the launch that got me to the Mun. It actually, I think this entire launch took about 25 or 26 minutes. About half the time I was actually recording this video is just this launch. The video itself is much more because obviously it's sped up. Well, actually I think it's less than half, but it's a decent chunk of it at least. This launch took quite a while. One thing I would add if I would rebuild this rocket is definitely some better placed SAS and RCS thrusters, because the RCS thrusters in this are not really well placed, so it made turning this thing kind of weird. So I actually went through a few different models. Originally I started with a nuclear engine, was going to be the engines on that stage that we're on right now. However, eventually I went through the swivel, and that wasn't quite enough, so I did the vector with half gimbal, which worked perfectly. So 4 vectors with the half gimbal on worked really well. Now another problem I kept encountering is I kept running out of juice, of like electricity. So I ended up sticking about 8 solar panels in total on this entire ship, which definitely helped keep it from running out of battery. I also added some batteries eventually to the lander along with the ore holding tanks, which I didn't have in this episode. Now this ended up working out very well. I think I over-engineered. However, there is one thing I want to do before I attempt another Mun landing. I actually kind of want to add a secondary station, or kind of, I guess, complex, halfway between the Mun and Kerbal, possibly even one between the Mun and Minmus, that will essentially act as a fueling station. So it'll basically take a whole bunch of fueling tanks, and maybe I can add some fuel freighters and whatnot, something that would transfer fuel up there. Basically, the idea being that it will essentially act as a fueling depot, and what I might even end up doing is end up building a base on the Mun that is constantly mining for fuel and restocking fuel, and then have some sort of SSTO or launcher that I can launch to dock with this station and refuel from there. However, that is a long way off, so we're not really going to worry about that right now. The station itself I might get up, but it's probably going to be a while before we end up using it. So basically what I'm doing here is I was really just waiting. I was trying to go into orbit a bit. I was trying to wait for a money counter, but I got a little impatient, and so I ended up messing around with the maneuver node to try to get one. I did eventually get one. Now, you saw I got one earlier there, but I actually wanted one that was solid, so I didn't want one that was kind of finicky. I wanted one to where I could have a little bit of leeway in my burn and still be able to get a solid Mun encounter. So I kind of messed with it until I got to that. It wasn't like perfectly solid, but it was pretty decent. So there was a bit of confusion here on my part during this section right here. As you're going to see, I ended up decoupling the stages. There wasn't quite enough fuel to get the orbit, and I had plenty of fuel in the other stage. But for whatever reason, the rapiers on the lander stage weren't working. For whatever reason, they didn't have fuel. What I actually ended up discovering, when I remembered, I was like, oh yes, they're dual phase. They were still in air breathing mode. I did fix that before I got to the maneuver node, thankfully, but I was really just wondering why isn't that working. I had plenty of liquid fuel, I even checked the tanks, everything was fine. I couldn't figure it out, and then as you saw there, I ended up figuring out that I didn't have them on closed cycle, I had them on air breathing. So as we go in for the Mun here, we get to that tedious part of just kind of waiting for the encounter, and this, for whatever reason, this landing took probably a good 5 minutes for the thing to come down. I burned way too early. I had a maneuver node, and it was about a minute off, or like 1 or 2 minutes off, and I started burning. I underestimated the power of the rapiers on closed cycle. They are much more powerful than I expected them to be, and I wasn't really paying attention to this. If I saw that, I probably would have burned a lot later. Maybe at about 500 or 600 meters would have been a good idea to burn from, because this slowed down very quickly. I feel like if I would have burned 30 seconds later, it would have been much better. Like, I probably would have gotten there pretty well with pretty good timing. But I got it below 60 and I just kind of kept it there, and so I was falling really slowly. So, but it did work, and it did get me down. I activated the drills, I activated the ore converter, then realized I didn't have ore tanks, and so I couldn't convert any ore into liquid fuel. However, if I had those, I'm 100% sure this would have made it back to Kerbal. It's got everything it needs. It's got air brakes, it's got parachutes, it's got powerful thrusters that would have been able to make it back once it's fully fueled. And I might even test that in the future just to be absolutely sure, because that is very much an assumption and not really hard science. So I'm probably going to actually end up fast forwarding through this part a little bit faster, as again, it takes forever. I might not, depending on how long it takes to actually get down there. I think it's going to be about a minute if I don't. But you can see that absolutely awesome shot of Kerbal in the background. This game is beautiful. It might have some slightly aged graphics, but it still is a beautiful game. Like, you can't tell me it's not. It's got about as good graphics as you can realistically get at the time, while still being able to launch how complicated it gets. This game can get. It is a good looking game, especially with the mods and the mods I have installed. I have a couple of visual mods, and I might eventually install some more. But yeah, it is a very beautiful game. So as you saw, I had a little bit of trouble with the landing there, and I ended up almost tipping over, which is not good. So eventually, for whatever reason, this time I was actually able to get it today without moving, and I'm not entirely sure why it didn't do that last time. I really only sped up time to try to see my liquid fuel go up. Again, I didn't have any ore tanks, and so I couldn't do anything. Now right here, I was trying to figure out why those drills weren't working. It's because I was in time speed mode, and I didn't realize that I was speeding up time. But I was, and this was actually successful. But yeah, that's going to be about it for this Lieutenant Diamond video, guys. If you liked it, please like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Lieutenant Diamond out.